The Egyptians knew that only the magic of the Pharaoh and the priests could carry out supernatural deeds and acts. It was thanks to that magic that the universal order was maintained. But its power could also help man to achieve his longed-for desire. The deceased had to be able to reach the world of the gods. If they thought he had gathered enough merits, they would grant him the much-desired eternal life. But he had to be prepared for the journey. The ancient Egyptians showed great detachment from earthly life. They considered it a brief transit en route to eternity.
Now we can say that the most important thing for them, that the life after this, not the real life. Real life was just temporary life for go to heaven, for the life after this.
In order for that to be possible, the human being had to be prepared for that transit. Therefore, the Egyptians deducted that the human body had to be made up by elements that would adapt to both worlds, some material and others immaterial. At the beginning of creation, when the Demiurge creates human beings, he gives them a body with a series of fundamental elements, so they can face all their earthly and spiritual needs.
Das, was wir heute vielleicht die psychosomatische Befindlichkeit
What we nowadays call the psychosomatic state was referred to in ancient Egypt through several terms.
Begriffe aufgegliedert. Da gibt es den
First there was a Ka,
da gibt es den
and then a Ba,
da gibt es eine Wesenheit,
and there's an entity called Ah.
Die eine ist stärker
Some
mit
of them
dem
are connected to the physical survival after death,
die andere mit der
and others to the
Unsterblichkeit
immortality
der Seele
of the soul.
verbunden. Vorstellungen, die so komplex sind.
They're complex visions that differ greatly from our Western line of thought,
Unser monokausales
in which we like everything to have its precise
wo man
name.
alles sehr klar und präzise benennen möchte.
The idea of mummification was the same as that of the divine statues in the temples. The statue served as material support to the worshipped god and was a link between the two planes of existence. In order to establish communication, his other material self had to be present. Following that criteria, the Egyptians considered that the earthly body also had to be preserved eternally by that process in order for the spiritual body to ensure its eternity in paradise. Once embalmed, the deceased had to be prepared for the sacred journey.
Im Zusammenhang der Bestattungszeremonien, wie sie in vielen Gräbern,
In what concerns the
aber
burial
auch
ceremonies,
auf Papyri dargestellt,
as they are described in many tombs and
gibt
papyruses,
es als eine der zentralen Handlungen die
a crucial
sogenannte
act is what is called
Mundöffnung.
the opening of the
Ein
mouth.
Priester öffnet
The priest
symbolisch
symbolically
die Augen,
opens the mummified
Nase
deceased's eyes,
den Mund des
nose and
mumifizierten
mouth,
Verstorbenen,
reviving his senses.
auf diese Weise die Funktionsfähigkeit
The
der
deceased can
Sinnesorgane.
once again see,
Der Verstorbene
Smell.
beginnt wieder zu sehen,
breathe,
riechen
and talk.
und zu atmen und zu sprechen und bekommt dadurch die volle Funktionsfähigkeit, ja eine Funktionsfähigkeit, die über die Zeit
He regains the ability to use the senses beyond the earthly life,
eines irdischen Lebens hinausgeht, denn diese durch die
and that regained ability
wiedergewonnenen
will
Funktionen
work for all eternity.
für die Ewigkeit funktionieren. Der Verstorbene
The deceased
wird dadurch
can live eternally.
alle Ewigkeit lebensfähig und aktionsfähig.
The ceremony would take place in the first courtyard of the tomb, where a series of purification rituals were carried out. After that, a curious dramatization would take place in the sarcophagus room. One of the priests would play the role of the deceased and had to be awakened by the deceased son. Some interesting ritual instruments were used, in the shape of adzes, knives, and cotton swabs. They would be taken to the mouth, eyes, ears, and other vital parts of the deceased in order to revive his capacities in the afterlife. Once in the afterlife, the deceased had to face the judgment of Osiris, the god of resurrection. Before 42 judges, he had to prove his moral integrity, what is called the negative confession of sins.
During his life, but after the death, he needs only Osiris to be fair, to be a very good person in front of Osiris and telling him that I was a very good man, I didn't steal, I was not thief, I was fair man, I work with my hands, I feed the poor people, and Osiris will say, okay, go to heaven. That's the thoughts of ancient Egyptians written in so-called Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Along with the declaration of innocence of the deceased's judgment, another important episode that seemed to happen in the room of truth, or in the room of justice, is the weighing of the heart. In it, Osiris is standing under a dosel, and there's a scale placed before him in which the heart will be weighed. Several deities are present, like Horus or Anubis, whose role is to accompany the deceased up to where the scale and Osiris are.
The weighing of the heart consisted basically of placing this organ in one of the pans of the scale and weighing it against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the deceased's sins weighed more than the feather, he was devoured by Ammit, a monster that was part hippopotamus, part crocodile, and part lion. That entailed spending eternity as a non-being, condemned to the punishment of the Egyptian hell. If his heart weighed less than the feather, then the deceased was declared justified and blessed. From that moment on, he would live a placid existence in the afterlife, alongside Osiris. The magnificent constructions that we see today along the valley of the Nile have undoubtedly achieved the purpose of their creators. The ancient settlers of Egypt loved the earthly life's beauty, but only as a brief transit en route to the true immortal existence. To please the gods, they built to their scale, designed their temples and tombs with mathematical perfection in their shapes and proportions, and aligned their contours with the sun and other heavenly bodies. Their obsession was to maintain the cosmic order at all costs. They could not permit everything to return to the primeval chaos. To that end, they learned to use language and the magic power of the gods and communicated with them. They discovered where the sun went at night and how it managed to come out each morning. And most importantly, they discovered how to access the underworld to be alongside the gods for all eternity. Magic, science, and religion represent the nature of man, his way to reveal himself before the terror of nothingness, the struggle to penetrate the mysteries of his own existence and those of the universe. It's a mixture of strange seduction and scary unease that not only makes him aware of his insignificance, but also allows him to feel proud of his humble human condition.